Friends, we are now going to begin the service for Mrs. Louise Stein. I would ask any of you who has a cell phone to please turn it to the off position. Officiating our service today will be Rabbi Rachel Heaps from Temple Jeremiah.
We begin our service with an act of tearing, an outward symbol for the state that so many who loved Louise, who were touched by her life, their inward world is torn. So this act of kriya, this act of tearing, is a symbol to all who know all of you, that your lives have been torn. And it's also a symbol that the thing that repairs that tear is the thing that was there all along. The love that she shared with each one of you becomes the thing that mends, the thing that repairs, the thing that always holds you together. So I invite all of you who are wearing a memorial ribbon to step forward. Baruch atah Adonai, Hadayan, Ha'emet. Blessed are you, Adonai, the judge of truth. I think we can Taylor can also help start it if you like.
Oh, thank you very much. We got her up.
We're torn. No, you're good. You're good now. No, he's on the right side. He's on the right side.
No problem. Thanks for helping. Thanks, Rabbi. That's my sister and my brother.
Okay.
Thank you for everything.
Mourning is the price we pay for having the courage to love others. Even in grief, we know that the wonder of human life is too complex and too magnificent to be memorialized in endless pain. The gifts, the spirit of our loved ones that was given to us, they cannot be weighed and they cannot be measured, nor can they be lost or even tarnished by time. Even in our darkest hours, we know that some of their light and some of their warmth will always be with us, bringing comfort and courage, and in the fullness of time, healing and peace. We remember Louise, sister, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, aunt, friend, loved one, dedicated one. We remember her and join our hearts together to give comfort and strength to her family. Mourning is a time filled with many emotions and many memories, both bitter and sweet. We begin our service with the recitation of psalms and prayers, thus linking Louise's life with millennia-old tradition of the people of Israel and the eternity of God. One of the passages that is most familiar at times like these is the 23rd Psalm, some call the Shepherd's Psalm. And oddly enough, it doesn't actually speak of death. It speaks rather of a person who's going through truly trying time in their life. A person who needs support and who needs a reminder that there is goodness in the world. And that goodness can be found in the comfort of others. That goodness can be found in knowing that they are taken care of, even when the person caring for them might seem far away. There is always something, there's always someone to support, even in memory, even in distance. There's always someone to care. Adonai rohi lo echsar Bino teshayar mitzeni. Al mei menuchot yenachaleni. Nafshi eshovev yancheni v'magle tzedek leman shemo gam ki elech begeit samavet lo ira rak yatai madi shivtecha numishantecha hemayanachamuni ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged sorerai t'shantan v'shemen roshi kosirivaya achto v'chesed yirdefuni kol yamei chayai v'shavti beveit Adonai le'orech yamin. The translation to this psalm, the 23rd psalm, can be found the inside of our pamphlets. We read together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. These moments of memory, sometimes it can be incredibly hard to think of the right words to say at exactly the right time. And our tradition teaches us that we don't always need to say words. Sometimes all we need is memory. Sometimes all we need is a thought. So we take these next few moments to call the memory of Louise into our hearts, into our minds, and into this space in a moment of silent reflection. Esainai el hecharim me'ayin yavo ezri Esainai el hecharim me'ayin yavo ezri Ezri me'im Adonai osei shamayim va'aretz Ezri me'im Adonai osei shamayim va'aretz. The writer of Ecclesiastes wrote, "The eye never has its fill of seeing. Young or old, those who depart this life never see enough of the world. They never complete their task, and they never cherish their loved ones enough before they are called home. How they yearned for yet another respite from the final summons, and how we yearn to have them close to us, for yet another challenge in our lives, yet another joy, yet another precious moment together. God be now with those whose hearts are broken, because whenever parting comes, it always comes too soon. Console them at this moment. Be near with them when their light seems distant. Sustain them, O God, until the time of healing, in this time of memory. There are so many who loved Louise, so many who have so many stories to share. And I think she would be truly honored, truly grateful, filled with joy to know that her family are the first people in line to share those stories. So first, I call forward Kathy and Rebecca to share a couple memories of sister and aunt.
My sister Louise, beautiful, elegant, woman of strength and integrity, trustworthy, incredible insight and wisdom, and the most important, the gift of unconditional love. As her baby sister, I have had the privilege of experiencing who she was my entire life, and I've enjoyed every single moment of it. I love you so much, Louise.
So my Aunt Louise really got a kick out of how I used to call her Auntie Grandma, because she introduced me to obviously my very first best friend, her granddaughter Tina, and we couldn't understand how one woman could have two roles in our life. So hence, Auntie Grandma. But that's what she was for me. She was every role I ever needed her to be. Sometimes she was my cool aunt, calling me every year on my birthday, so I obviously stopped answering so I could have her voice singing to me on my voicemail year after year, and they're still there today. And sometimes she was my second mom, especially when I had to raise sons, which neither one of us knew what to do. Many conversations started out, "Don't worry, I talked to Aunt Louise. It's normal." But as I became an adult, she became my friend, and I had the privilege to listen to her and to find out what her life was like as a daughter and a mother and a sister and a wife and a woman. And her advice to me was always honest and authentic. And when I had my hardest moments, her wisdom just gave me the strength to stand alone. And then she reminded me that I'm not alone, and that she loved me for who I was with all my faults and all my abilities. And so the memory I want to pull forward for every one of you, because I know it's there, is her standing in her doorway or in her hallway with her knees bent and her arms spread very wide apart and that big smile on her face, because you knew you weren't going to enter her home with that big hug. And that hug was always filled with love and acceptance and joy. So I know that hug is waiting for me when I will see her again, and I think about it every day as we move forward without her. I love you, Auntie Grandma.
Andy and Lauren.
Our mom could cook a feast for a crowd worthy of a Michelin star. Her holiday meals were out of this world. Her chopped liver might have been foie gras, her chicken soup might have earned the gold medal, and her brisket was always tender and juicy. There was always love in our house. There were 6 brothers and sisters, yet to Mom she had 6 only children. None of us were ever compared to each other. She had no favorites, yet we were all her favorites. Mom had her insecurities. If only she could see herself through our eyes. She was always asking if she was a good mother. When told yes, she would ask for examples. Mom, you managed to raise us all to have families. You taught us morals without preaching. You taught us how to be good citizens, learning by example. You let us learn from our mistakes without saying, "I told you so." You made sure that we had what we needed, but you made us earn what we wanted. You taught us the value of a job well done. You gave us praise without inflating our egos. You gave us the best years of your life. Yes, you were a good mother. That was our mom. She was a very special lady. During the pandemic, I worked out of her apartment 3 days a week for more than a year and a half. I got to be with her and learn more about her, and I'm richer for that time with her. I'll miss you dearly, Mom. I love you.
My relationship with Grandma strengthened over the years. When I was little, her and Papa went with me to Hawaii. Granted, I was 1 and just recently learned that, so that doesn't count. I had sleepovers with her. We'd go to movies, shopping, plays, swimming, walks, and would make ice cream sundaes. It was because of her that I learned I loved blackberries. She would always get them in raspberries before I came over. When we went shopping, I'd always help her pick out clothes. She would always try to find outfits that weren't black and white. I'd help her manage her clothes in the dressing room and help her when she struggled with her shirts. I remembered sitting in the front row to either Cinderella or Alice in Wonderland with her. Papa used to be our chauffeur and drive us around. We even saw High School Musical 3 together in theaters. We went to BG Theaters, and the woman who ran it got mad that she bought her water bottle in for medical reasons. Grandma turned around, put it in her purse, and kept walking past her. Like movies, we loved our walks. We would walk around the pond by the apartment and feed ducks. Grandma would always bring popcorn. I thought she was crazy, but the ducks loved it. Years later, I learned bread and popcorn clogs their arteries. Oh well, too late now. Lettuce was the way to go. We would also talk about using the grills on the other side and have a picnic, or do that after swimming at their pool. Grandma felt so free swimming. Her body wasn't in pain. She would swim with me using her pool noodles. Winter and summer, we'd always go. Recently, Grandma and I have gotten very close. I went to her apartment for lunch over the summer, we watched Hamilton, and we even got the Family Feud game for her. She loved it so much and watched the show all the time. She was able to spit off correct answers in a row. Man, we should have had our own Family Feud team. It would be me, her, my dad, Aunt Jill, and we would have to hold tryouts for the 5th. Maybe Aunt Kathy? She even helped me in my minor classes. We both studied psychology and sociology. We would talk about what I was learning, and she would get so excited. It was as if she was going back to school with me. I do have 7-year-olds in my classes, so it is possible. The past few months have been hard for me, but Grandma was always there. We would call each other 3 times a week or more. I would always get lonely at dinner, and we would call each other. We'd make our food and then sit down and call. If I didn't pick up, she knew something was wrong and would call an hour later checking. She would even say, "Call whenever you want," even if it was 2 a.m. When I was about 12 or 14, Grandma gave me this gold necklace that she wanted for me. It was spelled out her name. She wanted to melt it down and replace it with mine since our names were so similar. I told her I wanted to keep it as is. That way it was more special and it was a piece of her that I could wear. I will always treasure it. Now I can still have it with me while I even give this speech. Grandma, I love and miss you, and I'll miss our phone calls at dinner. Lauren.
Rick and Lorie.
March 2nd, 2020 was the last day I was in the same room with my mother. Because of the pandemic, because of health conditions, physical conditions, unfortunately, that was it. We would talk on the phone at least once a week. The week leading up to her passing, we spoke 3 times. On the third one, she started talking about things that took place 46 years ago, 25 years ago. And I now look back and I reflect that I think she knew something was happening. She was talking about things in the past and things that were important. After she passed, we booked our airfare to come up from Florida. And immediately I went to go call her to tell her were coming in, except there's no one to call. I had been in a cloud. I couldn't think. I am never a loss for words, but I couldn't think of anything to say. And yesterday, as we were on our plane ride up, our granddaughter Claire was sitting between Lorie and I, and I'm looking at her, and all of a sudden, everything started flowing. And it was her riches. Her riches were in her children, in her grandchildren, and in her great-grandchildren. Those were the most important things to her, to my father. Growing up, my mother could rub 2 nickels together and turn it into $1. She learned to make do with what they had and do things that others wondered how they could afford it. They were magicians. I love her dearly. As a child, I remember going with her to Weight Watcher meetings so that after she weighed in, we can go out for French fries. Her famous cheese sandwiches, her inexpensive pizza, taking a piece of white bread, ketchup on it, with oregano, putting cheese on it, and that was pizza. In the early 80s, she went back to work as well as school to help the family out. She was there. She's always been there for everyone. I will love and miss her forever. We were always on the same page. It was as if she had ESP. She would call when I'd need that call, or vice versa. She is a legacy of beautiful children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Appreciate you all coming here today.
I met Louise when I was just 17 years old and came into the family. And boy, was that a family. Huge. Never had a family so big, and it took me probably the first 10 years to learn everybody's name. She taught me how to make chicken soup. And I didn't really come from a family that cooked all that much, but that chicken soup was made with so much love. And with every vegetable that was put in it, kind of represented everybody here. It's a hodgepodge of everybody, welcoming, but tasting oh so good. She taught me the chicken dance, and I think every party and event that we've ever had since, we were insisting on that being played, because she just loved it so. We will definitely miss her so much. She's a part of my life, my second mother, and she is all represented here.
Jill.
I'm going to try. There's a poem. It's called God's Garden. Sorry. God looked around his garden and found an empty place. He then looked down upon the earth and saw your tired face. He put his arms around you and lifted you to rest. God's garden must be beautiful. He only takes the best. He knew that you were suffering. He knew that you were in pain. He knew that you would never, can't.
He knew that you were in pain. He knew that you would never get well on earth again. He saw the road was getting rough, and the hills were hard to climb. So he closed your weary eyelids and whispered, "Peace be thine." It broke our hearts to lose you, but you did not go alone, for part of us went with you the day God called you home.
Invite forward all of Louise's grandchildren. cousins themselves, each one loved in their own way.
My grandma always made it clear where you stood with her. She didn't sugarcoat, and she never held back in expressing her love and pride. Even at 38, she'd start every phone call reminding me that I was her first granddaughter, her Tina Bina, and how it was like yesterday that I was little, asking her if I can live with her and Papa when Stephen was born, in case my parents didn't want me anymore. She always made it known that she was there, emotionally present, physically present. Grandma and Papa were part of all of my special moments, from softball games to plays to graduations. They were even at my house waiting for me to come home from the hospital when Claire was born. What a blessing to have one of the first people ever your child to meet to be their great-grandparents. She was part of every joy, the tough days, and then those crossroad moments that could forever change the trajectory of your life. My husband Steve and I were dating at the end of high school, and I vividly remember having lunch with her and discussing my intentions to break up with him because I was going off to college. And Grandma was very firm in expressing what a terrible idea that would be, that I could be losing out on something significant. And thank goodness I listened, because Steve and I are now going on 14 years of marriage. And without her guidance, Claire and Jack might have never existed. I see her in them. I see her in me, and in many ways, my parents, especially in the way that she set the bar in showing how to be a loving grandparent. To be generous, she sent checks to all of us for every birthday, Hanukkah, anniversaries, and she would call if the check was going to be a day or two late to apologize. To be resourceful, and I had to write this speech on a coloring book page, so that's a perfect example. Never wasteful, which is probably why my parents freeze every little bit of leftovers. That every job is important, no matter how small. She taught me that early when I had the responsibility of shucking all that corn on her front stoop, and that made a big mess, but I loved it. To value family and not things. Grandma loved her tchotchkes and the dollar store stuff, but to her they usually had a purpose, and sometimes that purpose was to send a message. A couple years ago, when Claire was too young, she bought us a pair of matching necklaces that say, "I love you to the moon and back." That was something that we'd always say to each other. I was holding on to them until I felt Claire was ready. And ironically, just last week, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to give them to Claire this Hanukkah. I think Claire's ready. She's not going to break them. So Grandma never got to see us wear those necklaces. So it was that much more important for her first great-granddaughter to wear it close to her heart today. Grandma, I don't know if you can hear us, but I love you to the moon and back.
Ever since I was a little boy, my grandma was always my number one fan. She always wanted me to know how special I was, and that I was her Steve-erino. Even though watching me attempt to play sports was painful, she always showed up. She always showed up there to cheer me on. And when I was in a play at the Marriott, she would tell all of her friends to come and see me, and people would be lining up coming to tell me afterward that they saw the show and that my grandma was in the audience bragging to them about me the whole time. We loved going and seeing movies together, and whatever was my favorite movie was instantly her favorite as well. She would even call me to compare notes when she would see a new film to see what my thoughts were on that same movie. As I got older and my love for film turned into a career direction, she would always want to hear about everything I was working on, to the point that if she saw a commercial, she assumed it was mine, and even if it was nothing to do with me, she would be, "I love this new thing I saw you did." And I miss my grandma very much. This past year stole so much time. We would spend every Sunday together as often as we can, and I don't think I can ever now eat a bagel without thinking of her. I love you, Grandma. You're going to be with us for the rest of our lives in our hearts and our minds, and I'll always be your Steve Areno.
When I was young and needed someone to watch me on school holidays, my grandma became the de facto babysitter, and she was always ready for our arrival. I can never remember a day where at least one cabinet wasn't stocked full of assorted candies, ready for whichever one of us or combo of us was to be there that day. She would always have a plan for things to do with her grandchildren, be it playing in the local park, staying in to play board games, staying in to watch our favorite game shows and scoff at the contestants who fail no-brainer questions, or go to the movies, taking bus rides that were just long enough for me to fall asleep one stop from the destination. My grandmother would sooner give you the food off of her own plate than see you go hungry, which is a testament to the selflessness that she embodied on a daily basis. For as long as I can remember, not a single family gathering went by without Grandma asking if there was anything she could do to help, even long after it became laborious for her to walk from the living room to the kitchen. I will always miss the person that you were, and I will always be your tiger. I love you, Grandma.
There's a thing there. I kicked it. Being the oldest of three, my parents often sent me to go stay with my grandparents when they needed a little bit of extra help. Every half day during elementary school and some Friday afternoons, my grandma and Papa were there to pick me up in the carpool line. It was getting dropped off by my Papa at the Marriott to see plays with my grandma. It was going to McDonald's and getting a Happy Meal, and then her shaking the empty box and pretending to be surprised when I finished all my chicken nuggets. I was falling asleep in her bed watching Coraline. I was eating an entire can of Pringles in 20 minutes and her holding me when I inevitably got a stomachache. It was how proudly she handed me a bouquet of flowers after every single one of my dance performances. It was teaching me how to blow bubbles with gum and taking it out of my hair when I got a little too confident in my new skill. It was being able to take her out to lunch when I finally got my license and her fighting to take care of the check. It was pausing the TV every 30 seconds when watching a show in Hebrew for homework to explain to her what was going on, even though there were subtitles on the bottom of the screen. It was her calling and checking in whether I was 10 minutes or 10 hours away. It was her presence, her commitment to making people feel special, and how fiercely she loved us. I love you, Grandma. I'm always your Brie.
In his sorrow, Job cried out, Adonai Natan, v'Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mavarach. God has given, and God has taken away. Death and sorrow are not strangers to those of us gathered here to honor Louise Stein. With Job, we say, Adonai Natan, God, you have given, you gave us a loved one who will not be forgotten. For all that was good and enduring in her life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Adonai Lakach, God, you have taken away. We pray for the strength to turn our broken hearts into an altar of trust before which we acknowledge your sovereignty and affirm Louise's love. There truly are so many stories to tell and so many willing to tell them. Of course, we can only tell a few of them in this moment, but throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the year, throughout our lives, we have even more opportunities to remember Louise and who she was to these people gathered here. Of course, it seems like the biggest thing that defined her was her family and her love of each one individually, strongly, and bringing them together to be more than just family. She was always close to her siblings. She, in fact, became second mother to her sister and helped each one find their own way in life. She was grandma, she was aunt. She showed off her family by putting a photo of everyone on every surface possible. And if a grandchild might not have been born when that photo was taken, she would still take a little piece of them and tape it right to that photo to make sure that the family was together all the time. She was caretaker. She was provider. She was the glue that held them all together. She made everyone feel special for exactly who they are. What a talent that is. It seems to be so natural to Louise. Oh, as we heard, one of those ways that she showed her love was through food. She had amazing recipes. She would make chopped liver from scratch, chicken soup. She would practically make everything in the Jewish cookbook except for maybe kugel. Everything else was made from scratch, was made with love, to the point that there's maybe a little bit of family lore around a wooden chopping bowl that was so loved and so cared for by her and her recipes that she managed to give it away a couple of times to different people, all saying, "This is my chopping bowl. It's yours now." There's a couple people who can say that they have her only chopping bowl. Holidays were her gift, and of course, every day with her ended up being some sort of holiday, some sort of celebration. For every Jewish holiday, they would get together. For every birthday, for every anniversary, she managed to bring people together over the phone, around a table. No matter what, she reached out and brought people closer. Even her children's teachers, she managed to bring over and make them into more than just teachers. She would send cookies to anyone who needed. And of course, there was always a seat at her table for a friend or someone who didn't have somewhere to go. Though it was hard when her own children grew up and went and created their own lives outside of her house, but she didn't see that necessarily as a reason to be distant. She saw that as a reason to bring even more people in, to slowly invite grandchildren as they were born and their own spouses and loved ones and their own children, to bring all of them in. She would even have dedicated days of the week to each and every family member. Somehow, she managed to dedicate a day, an hour to all of them, even though maybe the day ran out. A day for her sister, a day for a grandchild, a day for a child, a day for everyone. And it wasn't just through food that she would share her love. All of her grandchildren somehow got a toy or some memorial. And in order to make sure that her love was fully expressed, all of those toys made noise. You would always be able to find the toy and know that it was from Grandma Louise. She did everything she could to bring them closer, but also, if necessary, she was willing to go to them. Even in her last year, even though she never got to use it, she got a real ID, ready to travel to colleges, just in case. She was everything when needed, and she did everything when called upon. She was so proud and so ready to celebrate every achievement, every sporting event, every theater event, every A on a paper or not so A on a paper. She managed to celebrate all of them. Each person had their place in her heart. And even I was being shown just yesterday, managed to find their way onto her clothing. That there would be sweatshirts with every single grandkid on there. Each one a nice little cartoon frog or something else, just so that she could carry them around everywhere. It wouldn't be Louise without a reason to say, this is someone I love and this is something that they've done. Even in a cabinet where someone would put their most precious items, the items that held the most value to them, Louise didn't fill that with precious china. She filled it with mugs and plates that were crafted in kindergarten. She filled it with photos. She filled it with love. The things that held truly the most value to her weren't the things that she spent money on, but the things that brought people together. She always wanted to be involved. She always wanted to know what was going on in people's lives. And even if there was a simple family dinner, she wanted to help make sure that she provided. Even to the point that she was seemingly content just folding a napkin to make sure that that dinner was truly one that people felt comfortable at. And people felt her love in her giving. Now, she had plenty of hobbies. As a child, she was into bowling. She would always find the best deal at a dollar store or cut-rate toys. She maybe even moved past her not so much joy in driving into a shopping cart, a mobile shopping cart. Only once, didn't really work out. But she would play games, mahjong and rummy cube. She would love the penny slots at Vegas and knew exactly when to say enough was enough, but would sit there nonetheless in finding joy in being able to play this game and slowly being able to see, hopefully, that number go up and up and up, 1 penny at a time. Even now, she was a part of groups of friends and groups where she was able to give herself away, give herself to those she cared about. She was part of a senior group that was ready and just at their next meeting to make her a vice president of that group. She was a lover of infomercials, always finding something else to call up and say, let's get this. And perhaps that even morphed into loving shows like Shark Tank. But that TV would be on and you could hear it, no matter where you were, knowing exactly what she was watching. And she wanted to share Shark Tank, SVU, all of the shows, Criminal Minds, and be able to say, let's watch this together. Maybe we don't have to be in the same room to watch it together, but we are watching it together. Of course, her life wasn't without her struggles, and specifically those physical limitations that kept her from doing the things that she truly wanted to do, which was being with all of you. Even just this last year in pandemic, when she struggled with her own COVID diagnosis, she still managed to find a way to be present, to come back for her loved ones, even with a difficult illness. She managed to give herself away through charities, through a love of things like St. Jude's, which it's so wonderful to see that we can continue to support that love, and as you'll see in your pamphlets. But she wasn't someone who would ever sit still. That passion that she had, that love that she had, would always keep her moving, would always keep her reaching out. That's what she did. She always reached out to bring those closer. For her, people were always more important than things, and she knew what beauty was inside and out. Through this time of difficulty, through these last 2 years of pandemic, she knew that this was the time to bring people closer. Even through physical distancing, this was the time to get closer. She was a caregiver. She was a caretaker. She always cared. and she found joy in even the smallest things. Always joy in the people, and even joy in the gifts of socks. Something that seems so simple, but something that she was always willing to say, this one brings a smile to my face. She loved to love all of you, and she loved that she could count on all of you to give that love to someone else. It was what made her so special. Hearing all of these stories from so many of those that loved her, I couldn't help but think of a poem that we find in our prayer book. Maybe not something that we often think of when we start the conclusion of our Shabbat services, but seems like the perfect poem for her. When I die, give what's left of me away to children and old men that wait to die. And if you need to cry, cry for your brother walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give me. I want to leave you something better than words or sounds. Look for me in the people I've known or loved. And if you cannot give me away, at least let me live in your eyes and not only in your mind. You can love me best by letting hands touch hands, and by letting go of children that need to be free. Love doesn't die. People do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. Zikrona livracha. May her memory always be a blessing. Our tradition gives us really only 2 prayers to say at times like these. The first prayer is a prayer asking for Louise's eternal soul to find comfort, to find rest, to find what she most wanted in her life, love, and knowing that there are arms around her, ready to embrace and ready to care. We ask of this from God, El Maleh Rachamim, God full of compassion. Please rise. El Maleh Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamtzeh Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, Im Kedoshim Utorim, Kezohar Harakim Hazhirim, L'nishmat Louise Stein, Shel Halcha Leolama, Ba'al Harachamim Yastireha B'seter Kanafav Leolamim, Bitzror HaChaim et Nishmata, Adonai Hu Nachalata, Vayanucha B'Shalom Amishkava, V'nomar Amen. In our pamphlets, we read the translation, El Maleh Rachamim. O God, full of compassion, thou who dwellest on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of thy presence, among the holy and pure who shine as the brightness of the firmament unto the soul of Louise Stein, who has gone unto eternity. Lord of mercy, bring her under the cover of thy wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Be God's possession, and may her repose be peace. Amen.
May be seated, please. Friends, this concludes our service here in the chapel. The interment will take place immediately at Shalom Memorial Park Cemetery in Arlington Heights. Following the interment, the family will be sitting Shiva. Inside your folders, you'll see here that Shiva will be held at the Katz residence, 2825 Farmington Road, Northbrook, Illinois. Shiva coordinator is Randy Berger, 773-742-2702. Following the interment today until 9 p.m. and Monday from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. For those of you who are on the live stream, this information is available on our website. Vaccination and masks are required. For those of you who are going in the procession with the family to the cemetery, I would ask you to please go diligently to your cars. We do have a time frame that we have to keep with the cemetery, so I'd ask you to please respectfully go immediately to your vehicles. Please make sure you obtain an orange funeral safety sticker. The sticker should be placed in the front passenger side window of your windshield. We would also ask that you have your bright headlights and flashing hazard lights on at all times. For an additional measure of safety, our staff will place flags on most of the vehicles throughout the procession. As we drive in procession today, please drive as closely as safety permits to the vehicle in front of you at all times. We want to avoid any large spaces or gaps in the procession, particularly as we go through intersections. I'm going to ask you also to please be considerate in terms of utilizing your cellular phone. It does raise a significant risk when we use our cellular phones. I'm going to ask everyone to please rise, and I'm going to invite the pallbearers up. The following individuals have been selected to serve as pallbearers: the grandchildren of Mrs. Stein, also the son-in-laws, Donald Brunger and Craig Katz, and honorary pallbearer Ronald Muller. I would ask everyone to please rise as we escort the family and clergy from the chapel.
All of us are going to follow behind 2 by 2.